Fluttershy's Big Night by Jumbled Thought. A really drunken night. Fluttershy lowered her bottle of cider, a red blush already covering her entire head, even though this was her first bottle. While she had never been the best with her alcohol, this was not the reason for rosy cheeks. No, that was more so because of the reason why Applejack was downing her sixth bottle of cider.
Don't you think that's a little much?
Applejack turned her gaze to Fluttershy for a moment, before letting out a mighty yawn. Maybe, but if I'm going to be helping you fuck my brother, I want to be good and drunk for it. Fluttershy's wings sprang from her back at the mention of the reason of her visit, but were soon brought around to cover her face. She swallowed hard, thinking back to a week ago. She had only meant to let her friend know she was interested, and that she wanted book recommendations for her trip to the library. Applejack hadn't wanted to hear a thing about that, and thought a full-grown mare should learn in much more straightforward ways, which now led to Fluttershy and her sitting in the Apple family living room, steeling their nerves before they went upstairs to a Big Mac that was drugged to stay asleep. Both had their apprehensions about it, and for most of the week Fluttershy had simply said no to the idea. She was afraid of ever seeing a cock, let alone riding one. However, even a shy mare like her was prone to fantasy, and Applejack had said she would be there for Fluttershy no matter how awkward it was. One sleeping potion from Zecora later, and Fluttershy had her completely anonymous night. She only hoped she would enjoy it as much as she had envisioned in the past. Applejack finally hopped off the chair she laid upon, coming down with a hard thud, and causing both mares to wince at the sound.
Sorry.
She shook her head, bringing up one hoof to try to stop the ringing.
All right, Fluttershy. It's the middle of the night, and that potion isn't going to work forever. It's now or never.
Fluttershy swallowed hard as she separated her wings from her eyeballs, her body trembling while she drank the last of her cider.
Never? Couldn't we just try again another night?
Applejack turned to her friend before raising a singular eyebrow. So I can drug my brother again and get him prepped for sex? Sorry, Fluttershy, but it took me almost all of last night to come to grips with today, and I still needed all of that cider.
Fluttershy lowered her head, gently nudging the cushion beneath her. I'm sorry. If you don't want to do this...
She stopped as an orange hoof placed itself on hers.
Hey, Sugar Cube, if I wasn't certain, we would not be here tonight. And if you need to call this off, that's fine.
Applejack flashed to Pegasus a soft smile as they met each other's eyes.
I don't want you to do this simply because you think you need to.
Fluttershy thought for a moment that her heart had skipped a beat as she continued to look Applejack in the eyes before nuzzling against her.
I'm going to be nervous no matter what. If tonight means having one of my best friends there to keep me calm...
She swallowed hard, blushing deeply as she stepped off the couch she had been on.
I think we should get going.
Applejack nodded, leaving her hat down on the table. Where they went, it would be of no use. The creaks of the stairs stopped Fluttershy each time, and she almost didn't move when Applejack pushed against her wide flanks. If she didn't, though, she would have had to find out if her drunk friend was bluffing about rubbing a different region of her to get her moving. So they made slow progress up, with the farm mare having multiple chances to enjoy the squishy rump that was attached to her shy friend. Once the two were up there, Applejack took the forward position, leading the way to Big Macintosh's room. Her tail swung side to side far more than it should, and, despite knowing that she really shouldn't, tempted Fluttershy to stare at pink folds that lay between Applejack's thighs. Each time she got a glimpse, though, she would immediately look away, hoping steam didn't start to come off of her. Finally, with both mares ever so slightly wet, with red faces, of which only one could even try to look at the other, they opened the room to their waiting stallion. Applejack did not push, prod, or say a word. She merely sat, rubbing Fluttershy's back as the Pegasus merely stood there. "Take your time, honey. We're in no rush if you don't want to be." Fluttershy's mouth was bone dry at this point, the sound of her heart hammering in her ears. Her legs twitched, trying to move forward, but what was so much simpler earlier that day now seemed impossible. I never managed to ask before, but what exactly did you have planned for tonight?" Applejack nodded, continuing her gentle pets as the two stayed in the doorway. "Well, ideally, we get you to the point where he's rutting you as deep as his shaft will go." She felt the other mare tense, smacked her drunken mind for just how stupid she could be. But we're probably not getting there, nor do we have to. I was expecting only for some touching, maybe a lick or two." Fluttershy's eyes were as wide as dinner plates now, all knowledge of their plan seeming out the window, now that they were actually about to execute it. You're supposed to lick it?" Applejack nodded, her hooves slowly running along Fluttershy's back, inch by inch. "Well, I mean, think about when you're helping yourself. You use a whole hard hoof." The tip of her rough hooves grazed Fluttershy's slit, causing the mare's wings to become fully erect. Imagine that, but with something warmer, softer. Fluttershy furiously nodded, now certain that her mane must have caught on fire. The more she thought about it, though, the more and more the initial desire to learn about sex came to the forefront of her mind. She blamed the alcohol for it, but that was also the last push to get her into the room. There lay a large red stallion. Already on the lower half of his sheets a large tent had been erected from the white blanket, and Fluttershy swallowed hard. Applejack herself was a bit taken aback by the apparent size of her brother, and trying to chuckle nervously. Must be having pleasant dreams." Fluttershy barely let out a squeak as she stepped forward, her body unable to turn around. Her drunken mind told her that it couldn't possibly get any worse, even when Applejack pulled away the covers. Before her was a testament to the virility of all stallions, a throbbing member that twitched in the air, its medial ring quivering as a small bit of clear liquid came out of its tip. Its stench came to her, causing one of her back hooves to lift as her mouth watered. She almost fell over in her lightheadedness, but Applejack was there to stop the Pegasus from crashing down. It's so big." Applejack nodded as the two righted, taking another moment to watch the rock-hard cock that seemed to dominate the room now. "Well, I'll say this, I'm really relieved that does next to nothing to me." "Is that a good thing?" "As I'm his sister, it is the best news I think I've ever received." A slight giggle escaped Fluttershy, but then she looked to the ground, her body shaking like the very thing she was supposed to be examining. "So, what now?" Applejack came beside her friend, before wrapping a hoof around Fluttershy's, and slowly lifting it up. For a moment, the four mares stopped, waiting for the tension in the yellow leg to leave, before pushing the Pegasus's fetlocks against Big Mac's throbbing cock. "You can just look, but I thought I would help you with the first step." Fluttershy swallowed hard, shaking at the fact that she was actually doing something sexual to another pony. But another squeeze from Applejack caused her to glance over. Her friend was still just smiling, seemingly certain that she could do this. Fluttershy took one more breath in and came just a bit closer, now taking in the massive shaft before her. Applejack left her to the discoveries she might find, letting go of the now stable hoof and trotting to behind her friend. Fluttershy didn't even notice as she pushed the shy mare's tail to the side and caught a glimpse of her leaking folds, quivering and trembling for more. She would not be so bold as to give Fluttershy more yet, though, not while still going unnoticed. A gentle kneading into the voluptuous presented before her did catch the other mare's attention, and she turned back to AJ as she was pushed closer to the balls that lay against Big Mac's thigh.
Applejack?
Sorry, but Applejack took in a deep breath, trying to keep the thoughts she wanted to say away from what she was supposed to. If you're gonna take that later, I want to make sure you're ready. Besides, even if you don't, wouldn't you care to learn how it feels to have another touch you? Fluttershy's breath caught, and she lifted one hoof to her face, trying to cover it as her body trembled. Just for a moment, she lowered her head before bringing it up and letting Applejack have her way. She thought she heard her friend say, "How I wish I could always have this," before something warm and wet came against her slit. A gasp was ripped from Fluttershy's lungs before she fell back, her body now on top of Big Mac's girth as she looked up to the ceiling.
I thought you were just going to touch.
Applejack put her hooves onto the edge of the bed, a smile on her face as she lowered herself. She wanted to say why she had skipped the step so badly, especially as she took in the sweet scent of her friend's arousal. But she was here for Fluttershy's fantasy. I guess I got overexcited. If you don't want me to lick again, just say so. Fluttershy put her hooves above her face, trembling as she felt Applejack's breath against her wet snatch. While part of her was afraid, there was part that screamed for more, to stop worrying, to enjoy the fact that she was currently sandwiched between a mare's hot lips and a stallion's large, throbbing cock. She whispered into the air, "Keep going." With a few gentle nudges, Fluttershy was persuaded to move up her rump, sliding against the shaft, with the cock resting between her cheeks. Fluttershy's hips moved ever so slightly, grinding herself against the wonderfully thick dick that was between her ass. Her hoof was about to touch her heated crotch when Applejack stopped it. She looked down and caught a tear running down her face.
Applejack?
The farm mare's pupils shot wide, and she didn't bother not trying to avoid her brother as she pushed herself forward, brushing her muzzle against his brother before she kissed the open folds of her friend. Her muzzle kept teasing the ridges of Fluttershy's pussy, while her tongue slowly came out, inching closer and closer. Another moan squeaked out of the small Pegasus as Applejack's tongue gently lapped up the sweet drops that were pouring out of Fluttershy at this point. Fluttershy's moans soon filled the room as Applejack's tongue got faster and faster. No inch of her slit was safe from the farm mare's experienced tongue as it twisted, turned, and dived within the Pegasus. Her hips slid back and forth along the trembling mass beneath her, only causing more hormones to fill the air as grunts came from Big Macintosh. Fluttershy honestly couldn't believe she had never tried anything like this before, and was quickly feeling something rise within her. The moment she thought about the pressure building within her, Applejack moved ever so slightly up and sucked on Fluttershy's engorged clit. The effect was immediate, as the whole mare's body stiffened, her eyes opened wide, her hips sliding back, dragging along the shaft one more time, as Fluttershy tried desperately to stop whatever was coming. A high-pitched squeal escaped her, before it turned into a scream, as the dams within her broke, and the pressure came flooding out, drenching Big Mac's stomach in her sexual spray. Fluttershy panted hard, before falling onto her side and onto the stallion beneath her chest. Applejack soon crawled up, panting herself, before she laid down next to Fluttershy. The two locked eyes, the stench of sex in the air, along with Fluttershy almost being able to taste herself of Applejack's breath. Looking into Applejack's green eyes, though, she felt something stir inside of her. This something stopped her from protesting when Applejack pulled her in and sent electricity down her spine when their muzzles touched. The two spent a solid minute tentatively letting their tongues touch and tap against each other. While she had loved being between Fluttershy's legs, somehow the taste of her dry mouth was 100 times better. Pulling away, though, it left Applejack cold. I'm sorry. I know you like stallions and that. She stopped, looking at the hoof on her muzzle. I thought I liked stallions, but I never knew a second option, and with you... She only smiled, looking deep into Applejack's eyes as tears met the edges of her own. Applejack pulled her in close, wrapping her into a tight hug. I love you, Fluttershy. Fluttershy nuzzled into Applejack's chest, her eyes growing heavier by the moment. She only barely breathed, I love you too, before she was fast asleep, with Applejack soon to follow. Big Mac waited a few moments, wincing at the pain in his crotch. However, he still eventually wrapped his strong hooves on top of the mares that resided on top of him. He had agreed to this whole thing to see how he felt about Fluttershy, unaware of his feelings and hoping he could at least help the shy mare out. Seeing his sister in such bliss, though, made those thoughts vanish from his mind. Unfortunately, a pent-up pecker is not so easy to ignore, and it would be almost an hour before he too knew peace that night.